with certainty. The next one, human need, is kind of this notion, once you have too much certainty, things get boring and you kind of get monotonous. So how do you create a sense of uncertainty or variety? And the variety is what gets people to want to experience the whole project. We have to kind of connect all these pieces and want them to reconnect in different parts of the environment. The third human need that needs to be considered as part of this is a need for significance, where people can feel a place for themselves and feel important in these environments. They feel good. But then the other kind of paradox there is, after you have too much significance, you want some connection with other people. So the fourth one really is about connecting and creating these linkages between everything. And that's kind of the fundamental goal. And the highest of the level is, what does this project or these projects really give back in the long term? How are they truly sustainable, and what's the contribution or the legacy? So those are all the kind of levels, and as you kind of build this foundation on those 5 to 6 components of great projects. And so using some models or processes really help us to understand what we're getting at. And you know, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. You know, we've got to keep what's important in front of us at all time to make quality choices. To say, sorry it was so long.
No, that was actually great, because I think what you just provided us is kind of a frame to think about the design problem. And I think part of leadership is really to kind of help. How do you kind of move everyone to this along the same direction, but at the same time kind of absorb everyone's ideas about how to move forward. I mean, on that note, I think Matt will give you a nice point for you to jump in the sense that you're a big advocate of street life and pedestrian life, and spacing has been really revolving around like how do you on the ground like create street life? How can the average pedestrian contribute to that, or what are they looking at, or how do they react to city forms? Why don't you talk about your perspective on the two projects from that light? Just because in the conversation you were talking to us about there's a change in demographic that kind of moved very quickly for Garden Grove, and the kind of infrastructure reform, just by their nature don't move as quickly as they could be. So hence there's this kind of gap between the physical form and how they're used to the needs of the neighborhood. So what do you elaborate on that for us?
So I see many of you actually have taking a look at this. It's the City of Toronto's walking strategy. And the reason why I brought this is not because I really want to toot my own horn. I helped develop this. I was part of the city's City of Toronto's pedestrian committee, which is a citizen. It was 15 members are selected at large, different corners of the city, different professions and whatnot. And we meet once a month. We give feedback to the city on projects that they're doing. And over a period of time, we decided that the city needed to have a comprehensive policy moving forward. And the City of Toronto, the reason I brought it is because the City of Toronto developed at a similar time as Los Angeles, Metro Los Angeles and Metro Toronto. They're similar in age. The one thing is, while the two cities were developing, it seems Metro Los Angeles went the route of the automobile, and Toronto went the route of a lot more public transit and pedestrian-oriented development. And kind of what benefited us in many ways was the old City of Toronto didn't hollow out. Everyone pretty much stayed, and now they are a very vibrant part of the city. And our greatest challenges in Toronto are in our inner suburbs and in the suburbs outside of the City of Toronto limits, in the Greater Toronto region, and they're very similar to what Laguna Hills and Garden Grove are experiencing. When I got to report the other day and I read through them, I was excited by the possibilities of Laguna Hills because you have anchors, you seem to have a decent mall, but you also have this hospital. So things aren't going away in the same way that Garden Grove was. I looked at Garden Grove and it was. I got anxious. It's a tremendous challenge, and it's exactly for the reasons that you said. Demographics can change so quickly, but the built form can't, and government policies really can't keep up with that at the same time as well. So the challenges of Garden Grove are very, very, very challenging, and I'm not envious of it. I have to say, but it's where you see the built environment being adaptable is those neighborhoods that are still alive. And Henry talked about Queen Street being in Toronto being this great place that he loves to walk. Buildings are 130, 150 years old along the strip, and it is still the most vibrant part of the city. It's been gentrified a fair amount, but it's still very vibrant. It's a lot of small businesses. There are chains that are in there, but it's right beside a mom and pop shop that does textiles. Beside an H&M, and then the next one's a Cleaners, and it makes the life around the street life especially very vibrant. And that's why I also mentioned complete streets. And I think it talks to exactly the point that Martin was saying here. Is you have to start. I think in many cases, and certainly over the last 50 years, we've been building our cities from the automobile and those needs down towards the pedestrian as opposed to building out. And that's why I talked about complete streets, is because you start with the pedestrian and the public, what is needed for the right-of-way for pedestrian, and then you start thinking about cycling and public transit and then the car, and you think about all those spaces in between the frontage of those buildings as one big space, and how you properly divide them up, or evenly divide them up. Nice equity, though, right? So it's those things that I see as like very potential in Laguna Hills is I think is much greater and has a potential to succeed in it. But the reason I have this document out, or I mentioned this document, the walking strategy, is that one of the main chapters is about leadership and about the city taking a real strong role in fostering and making sure these policies are developed, and making sure that the human element is what is thought of and then built out that way.
Can I build on that a little bit? Because I think Garden Grove is particularly challenging, but there were some things that I think it was Tony said in his remarks that I think were really great in terms of how do you approach this problem. The issue is you have a completely inflexible landscape that's not serving the needs of the community, not fostering kind of a vibrant community experience or community amenities and resources for the people who live there. So what do you do? And I think the process that they're talking about, I really thought was right on track. He said that their plan is to let the process dictate the product. And I think that's exactly right. Letting this be a little bit organic and emergent, and not going in and saying, okay, we're going to, here's the plan and we developed it, and we're going to impose these lines on, and one of the other gentlemen was mentioning, we're not going to go in and jackhammer this and knock down this and rebuild that, but really looking at the pedestrian scale. And the smaller pieces that you can start to break up that kind of monolithic block a little more organically. The other thing that struck me, I'm a sustainability consultant, so I'm always looking, okay, well, what are your sustainability goals? But letting the process dictate the product based on a vision is exactly the right process. And the vision that was there, he listed 4 things: market demographics, transportation, community and economic vitality, and housing trends and needs. So I'm thinking, okay, sustainability, those are all related to sustainability really directly. Just the fact that you're dealing with these sites and thinking about them in terms of TOD and POD is a sustainability strategy, and improvements in this area rather than sprawling, rather than going somewhere else, but really reusing these sites, revitalizing them, breaking them up, and helping them support this community. And I think really looking at the specific demographics of Garden Grove, and this is something think Yolanda and I talked about yesterday, as she was really explaining, you know, the very strong Asian influence and the Asian character of that theater, building on that, really looking at what's there, what are all the pieces, who are the people who live there, how are they using that, and letting that process be emergent. So exactly what you're talking about, letting that be about entertainment is interesting. It was the first time I really thought about, okay, it's not about retail, so maybe there's bowling and there's you know, other kinds of entertainment. There was the first time I thought of bowling as a sustainability strategy. But I like the shift away from retail and away from consumption as the thing that we all do all the time as Americans. What else can we do? I think that's great.
As you were speaking, having your bowling epiphany, I just realized that both Laguna Hills and Garden Grove have landscape in their name, like it's integral to their name. So I think, for me, oftentimes with these kind of developments, a city evolves over time. You know, when settlers first came and planted the first flag, there usually is a very distinct sense of place because of landscape. And over time, as things evolved, we took over and landscape disappeared. And so that invoked me to ask a question, is like, how do you evolve from the changing demographics to the landscape? How would you evolve a sense of identity, like, for the community? Because I think part of the big struggle, especially for sprawl, is who am I, or why am I here, or not philosophically, but literally, physically, like, do I belong here? I think that's a kind of question that we could float around and bounce around the four of us to see where we can go with it.
Excellent question, excellent. I talked just real quickly about that. A lot of the efforts that we do in our practice is all about branding and identity and trying to create an image for what a place really wants to be. And it's actually a very interesting, challenging process, but it's very much creates that voice for what the place wants to be. When you think about it, a lot of times the first thing that people identify with is the logo brand identity of what they come across. The first thing they look for is a sign or some indication or marker that they can connect to and understand where they are. And so what we have to key into is a sense of authenticity that, again, starts from the inside out. How do we kind of find the roots of place? Again, from the names, where people first derive these identities from, sense of landscape and character and personality, an inside-out approach to developing a sense of brand and that character. And then create, again, just like what we've done in this process today, what's that vision? 3 to 5 sentences, a vision statement that captures that spirit of place and core values. What are the patterns or colors or imagery that evokes this sense of place? And then how can we capture the essence of all this into a mark or an identity or some kind of symbol that represents what this is about? And then the whole notion of how do you connect that into the environment in a sense of either, you know, markers or monuments or elements that really identify a district as someplace special, unique. And then the next component is how do you reach that identity out and bring people to it? So how do you kind of expand those boundaries of who you are and what you are to really connect? And that's the notion of transit TOD. How do we kind of create those linkages that really, you know, create some polarity and get people to want to come and connect to these environments? So branding identity is about authenticity, consistency, an inside-out approach to some kind of mark or brand or personality or voice that really enriches this experience and connects people to that environment.
I can talk a little bit about that. And if you look at the postcards for my magazine, if you look on the back, there's these buttons. And what they actually are is they are the walls, the tile patterns and colors are replicas of the station platforms in Toronto subway stations. So a number of years ago, I went to the TTC is the Toronto Transit Commission. I went to them with this idea that I said, I think people like their subway stations. If I made a button with the TTC logo, no one would have bought it. But people have a real direct connection to the place that they see every day, where they live or where they work or someone, you know, their family or whatever, where they travel to. And